for today. So, talking about stagnating sales. So, for the last, I'd say, sales have stayed roughly the same. And, that's not from me not trying. Like, we've tried a lot of different things. I pumped in a lot of money in advertising, tried a lot of different setups, brought in different employees, tried different sales techniques, um, played around with the pricing. And no matter what I seemed to do, like I was stuck at the same thing. And I was telling my sales trainer, I said, I just feel like we are stuck and destined to stay at like around $2 million in sales. And because like all the signs pointed to it, it's like we tried everything, right? And nothing was changing. And it was getting frustrating. And I've talked about this in other videos, but one of the things that we have just started doing, so this year we brought in sales training, right? And this isn't the first time, well, first time with a sales trainer, but not the first time with, focusing on sales. We use the Contractor Sales Academy through like Tom Reber, stuff like that. And I feel as though the results were decent. They were definitely better. It's the one reason why we started charging $75 to go out to estimates. And that's made a huge, huge difference. Not only for the day-to-day operations of the business, which it made it much simpler to run. And the reason for that is because we never really had a sales process in place. We were still closing at like we closed at 7%, which is just it's horrible, right? And but we were doing the same thing as estimates. So I was paying someone to drive around literally all day because we have so many leads coming in, like thousands. I've talked about it on the videos, but like we have like today alone, it's almost closing time, but we have the upper 30s or it's in the 40s at this point of unique callers that called in, and it's like to stay every like especially now with the gas prices and everything else, because the gas prices are honestly like another employee at this point, and like it was just a mess, right? And nothing changed. We were always staying the same, and it was just getting frustrating. So anyway, we switched to that, and honestly, it helped quite a bit because of COVID. We were able to do basically the virtual, and it worked out really well. So we were doing that beforehand, and so we were kind of set up before anyone else was. Oh my God, this guy's gonna ram in the back of me, and because of that, it made things easier. So from that. And then, so anyway, we did that, but still, the sales stayed the same. We brought in the sales trainer, and things pretty much stayed the same. And I talked about a few videos ago, but it's because we had all these issues that we're kind of going up against this year. Last year I wish we had the sales training last year. It would have made a huge difference. Last year we had free money and the gas prices lower. We didn't have the inflation and everything else. Plus, it was still a lot of people that were kind of stuck at home, so they were still moving forward with the fencing. Whereas this year, like everything's pretty much open at this point. People are much more comfortable to go places. Even for my wife, that got hit really hard with. She didn't have COVID, but because of being pregnant and giving birth right at the beginning of COVID, it was a super scary situation because they said they were going to take the baby away if we had COVID. So, like, she literally there was no going anywhere, right? And so anyway, we had a lot of shit to deal with, and then this year, because there's no free money, sky high inflation and gas prices and you name it, our closing rate's staying about the same. Profitability wise, I think we're up like about 100 grand in profit this year. So that's a good thing so far, right? And anyway, so everything's been staying the same, and I just got to the point I'm like, and I keep on listening to Alex Hormozy videos, and the one thing he kept on saying was that you got to where you are in your business because what you know and like what basically my wife knows and my staff knows, right? Well, I don't have any sales experience. I don't have any real business experience except for the business that I'm currently running, right? So I can kind of talk about what I'm going through and the things that I've done, but like I don't know everything, right? And then especially with the sales, like comes down to sales, like when you're closing at 7%, like something's screwed up somewhere, right? So that's why I brought in a sales trainer. It was not cheap whatsoever, like multiple thousands of dollars per month. And because of that, yes, we are up 100 grand. And at this point, it's been like a $30,000 investment. So that's not bad. Put in 30, get out, 100. Like I'll take that day in and day out. But what we end up doing, and it may be too early to tell at this point, but we end up bringing a salesperson, right? So I brought in someone that knows what the hell they're doing. They've already made a pretty big impact with the first week alone, where they booked 9 consultations, and the rate's like 2 to 3 times higher than what my sales staff has been able to do. And the reason for that is like no one really has an experience, right? Like, so we've had them work with the sales trainer and everything else, but it's much harder to take someone from literally ground zero to build them into the person that you really need them to be, compared to bringing in someone with the experience and just letting them kind of like run with it, right? The only downside with that is they're not cheap, right? Because like they've already proven themselves, they already have a track record, and like so they're not going to be inexpensive, right? It's kind of the same like when we're first starting a business. So, you have to be cheaper just because one, you don't have the advertising and everything else, but two, you don't have any proof that what you do is going to be worth it, right? Now like we charge way more, just because like we have the systems down, we have the customer service down, we have everything down, the systems process, like you name it, it's all like pretty much squared away. But this is the one thing what we're doing is kind of like bringing in experts, right? So that's the next step, is we're starting with the sales just because we are closing at 7%, and that's literally the one thing that's kind of holding us back at this point. So that's what we're doing at this point, bringing them in, see what happens, and kind of going from there. So that's what we're doing with the stagnating sales. And if you're kind of going through the same thing, it could be for a multitude of reasons, right? So number one is you got to look at the whole cycle of the business. So talked about it before, but there's like three main stages, right? You have to get the leads to come in, you have to be able to close those leads, and then you need to be able to produce the jobs. And if you're lacking in any of those three areas, well, it's going to limit your sales, right? So the only thing, and I've talked about before, like the only thing that's kept me in business, am I back? I think I'm back. So you have to think about the customer, what they do. And they literally all do the same thing for the most part. Yeah, there's going to be some that go on Facebook and it's like, hey, can you recommend someone? But typically, they're going to type in whatever your service is near me. Fence company near me, deck company near me, whatever. They all do the same. That's what you have to focus on. And where do they do that? It's Google. Sure, be using, I don't know, Explorer and stuff like that. Sure. Could they be using Safari? Sure. But the vast majority of them are on Google, by far. Google, like whether it be Google search or Google My Business. I mean, not Google My Business. Sorry, Google Maps. Like I do it the same thing every time. Like literally every time, and so does everyone. For the most part, 80%. Speaking of which, like follow the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. It's 80% of your results are coming from the 20% of your effort, and that's Google My Business. If you need more leads, it's Google My Business by far. Now you could obviously do referrals and all that stuff, and that's what we're working more into. But for the most part, if you need the phone ring, Google My Business, number one. So if you need help with that, like we do offer a service for that. It's not cheap. It's $1,500 a month. That's for Google My Business SEO to get you show up. Number two is the sales. So that's the thing that I was severely lacking in. When you're closing at 7%, obviously something's wrong. Now, with that being said, we are one of the top highest price in the area, if not the highest price. So that's where the call volume is going to go down low as well. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's that. And then the final thing is producing the jobs. So we had this problem not last year, the year before. And it got to the point where we're like 16 weeks out. And the reason for it is we literally could not produce enough work, right? The employees I had and the staff and everything else, like they were putting in like nothing, right? They were putting in maybe like 15 posts a day, right? So like if it was a 25 post job, that was a 2-day job. Well, we end up bringing in subs. Didn't want to. Buddy Dave down in Florida, it's like, dude, just hire subs. Like, it's that simple. I'm like, no, I don't want to. few weeks go by, and he's like, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I was at that point like 10 and 12 weeks out." Then next time I talk, I'm like, "Dude, I'm like freaking 16 weeks out." And he's like, "Just hire subs." And I'm like, "I have all these issues with the employees, and like they're making all these excuses and all this other shit." He's like, "Dude, just hire subs. I don't want them to like it's my name on the business, blah blah blah." He's like, "Just hire subs." So I finally listened to him. I hired subs. It's literally the best decision I've ever made. At that point in time, we got our main sub Jose in here, and he is awesome. Like they get the work done. He's kind of like me as far as like ownership of a business. He's not your typical sub just in a truck. Like he has multiple crews running for you name it. He does it right. So that's another thing that we can get into, but that's besides the point. But anyway, if you're super booked out, and probably the number one reason that after talking to a lot of contractors is that you're still installing what you sell. You can't like, I'm not saying you can't do it, but in my opinion, you don't have a business, right? You have a glorified job. If you do not want the employees and everything else, and you don't want the headaches of dealing with the advertising and this and this and this, well, the solution's pretty simple in my mind, and that's being a subcontractor. Because at that point, you don't have to worry about getting your own leads. Like the leads are coming to you. It's not even leads. Like because when you have to deal with leads, then you have to deal with the like everything. Like you have to deal with answering the phone calls, the emails. You have to go out for the estimates and stuff like that, and you may not want to, right? And especially in the beginning, if you were working for another company and then you're like, you know what, I don't want to make them rich anymore. I want to make all the money and stuff. Well, you go from like as a fence company. So if you're working for a fence company and you're like, I just want to make the money. Well, that's fine, but you're only wearing one hat right now. You're wearing the fence installer hat. Okay. Well, when you go to own your business, it's now you have your fence installer hat, you have your leads hat, you have your answering the phone hat, you have the answering the emails hat, you have to go out to the estimates hat, you have to actually do the put the estimate together hat. You have to call that customer back if you don't do it right on site. You have to order the materials. You have to schedule the job. You have to call the 811. You have to make sure you're profitable. You have to do the bookkeeping. You got to handle the payroll. Next thing you know, you have 20 hats that you have to deal with. And you go from making, if you're 15, 18, 20 bucks an hour, or whatever it happens to be, even 25. What I've found, especially in the beginning when I was doing everything, is I went from, like, I started this without really even knowing how to do fence, but you go from making $25 an hour, you realistically will go down to like $8 an hour by doing all the other paperwork, running around, and everything else, by far. So you're gonna like literally make a third of what you thought you were, because you're gonna make the same amount, or you might make a little bit more, but your hours are drastically higher. Your stress level drastically higher. The fear of not having work in the winter is going to be scary as shit the first time. Especially like if you're in the northeast, whatever, it's scary as shit. Now down the south, you may not have that, maybe. So it might, in my opinion, knowing that what I know now, but I was never born. I was never made to do fencing. Let's put it that way. I'm never born or made. It's not my skill set. Can I install a fence? Sure. But I'm slow as shit. Like I don't know where the freaking level is half the time. Like when I used to install, like my quarter of my day was trying to find my level, because I would put it down and then I couldn't find it again. I was slow as shit and everything else. So that's where we're kind of. So again, like if I were starting out and I worked for someone else, next step, if you're an employee, go to subcontractor out, because then you can even talk to your current, guy, your current job, and be like, look, this is what I'm thinking. I really want to make more money. I know you can't afford to pay any more. How would I become a sub? You still have to get your own insurance and everything else, but they may be willing to do it. Especially if you're making hourly and you're like, look, just pay me X amount per post. You know exactly what you're going to pay, blah, blah, blah. Like I take care of the concrete. I have all my tools and equipment. You don't have to worry about anything breaking down anymore. Like that's all on me. They might go for it. I would have went for it, but it depends on the owner. So what I've found is a lot of contractors, especially fence people, but it's people in general, like they have a very limited mindset. And so what happens is when they hear that, they think that you're taking their job, or you're going to take their work from them. And it's possible, right? My crews, like, they were trying to steal work from me. But at the end of the day, like, you got to remember, and they got to remember too, there are hundreds, depending where you're at, hundreds of people a month that are looking for fence companies. Hundreds. Like, it's crazy. If you go to kwfinder.com, you'll see what I mean. Like, I've posted other videos, but I show you. I think there's 218,000 people a month searching for fence companies. Literally, it's only fence company near me. There's all kinds of other searches, like vinyl, cedar, aluminum, like all kinds of searches. But just only fence company near me, 218,000 people a month in the United States. There's work everywhere. So anyway, those are the three areas. So if you're stagnating in your business, it's probably one of those three areas. And if you're like, I guess the fourth area is like, you're like, if you're already working like 60, 80 hours a week, like, I guess if you're doing 60, you can go to 80. You really can't work more than 80. In my opinion, you really can't, especially with hard physical jobs, and then you got to deal with everything else. So if you're already working 80 hours a week, then the next step is to start getting other people to do the work for you. Number one way is to stop installing what you sell. There's a program that I had built. It's called the Profit Planner. You can find the link, I think, in my description or something like that. But I think it's just $27 one-time fee. That's it. And it will show you what's going to happen. You input some information, but then it'll show you what happens if you start getting away, like you stop installing what you sell, you have someone else do it for you. But you're like, yo, Joe, but like it's gonna cost me money to pay someone else. Well, no shit. But you can also, like, for me, the max I'm gonna install is like 15 posts a day, right? 15. We right now, there's days where they'll put in between the two subs, they might put in 60 and 70 posts a day. So there's like 4 to 5 times more work being produced. Do you think if you were installing one, you go from installing one job to like 3 a day, do you think you're gonna have money left over to pay those people and still make a hell of a lot more money and work a hell of a lot less? Yes, it happens. So anyway, hope this helps. I hope you guys like this different kind of format, just shit that I kind of go through. But anyway, hope you have an awesome day, and I will talk to you soon.